if you read the book of in Kings, Second Kings, I believe it is, where the story of King Solomon, who was involved in all sorts of political associations. Of course, he allowed his wives to set up all sorts of spiritual Baal type of worship platforms or so. The tax of the people. In other words, as a leader and a spiritual leader at that, he let politics, not to mention lust and other things, but there are all sorts of varying things that impacted leadership, and the people suffered. People suffered greatly as a result of that. There were great financial benefits for the kingdom of Israel during Solomon's reign, but the religious sacrifice and the taxes, the using your abusing the people in the way he did to build the temple, and all the comparison that I'm making is our spiritual leaders here are aligning themselves politically and economically in ways that are not benefiting, in my opinion, their flocks or so. When you get into groupthink and you start to push towards doing things because that's sort of the party line, and you're not taking a close examination at this 75 or 85-year-old man or woman who's going to come to church and expose themselves or risk, when you're not thinking about. When I was in Baltimore or so, it's just a little bit of ice. You don't have to cancel church. It's just a little bit of, how much ice does it take?
Sure.
For a woman to slip and break her hip.
Right. Right.
And when we get into the thinking where we don't look out for the flock, and we start to get into the group think and following the political and the economic ideologies, and straying away from what the conviction of our call and the word of God. And when we get caught up in that muck and mire, and unfortunately, I'll say it, like I said, I'm here in the Bible Belt now or so, but I think there's a lot of confusion and a lot of misinformation spiritually when it comes to politics and spirituality. And we're falling into this same pattern again, in my opinion, from what I can see. Yes, the economic and the politics and all that foolishness is all wrapped up in the decision making of the church, and that should not be.
Now, when you were originally trying to figure out how your congregation was going to respond to this whole pandemic situation, did you get a lot of feedback from your congregation, or were most people reasonable in terms of the level of lethality of what you were looking at?
Oh my goodness, heavens no. There was pushback. There was the repeat of what I was hearing, the Fox News talking points. This is all media hype. This is all an attempt to try to get back at 45. This was all, you heard all of those talking points, and it took some convincing. In fact, I thank God again for the Holy Spirit stepping in and moving the heart of some of the older matriarchs who were saying, listen, I don't want to come out here in this mess. We need to shut the church, shut the physical church meeting and transition into something more virtual. It took the matriarchs to come in and share their concerns in addition to what I was sharing. And that sort of helped push the tide a little bit. But there was tremendous pushback. And like I said, a lot of it, I think, was related to some of the political language that was being talked about at that time.
Sure. And as we know now, Fox News folks, they've altered their stance. And as we also know that many of those folks that held those opinions were actually preparing their families for this whole situation, as we saw from the divestitures of certain senators when they knew this thing was about to hit, and just a lot of different things. Now that the numbers are out, now that we're past the 60,000 mark in terms of deaths, now that we're past the million mark in terms of infections, have you seen a change in the attitude of your parishioners and those in the Odessa area, or are they still holding on to those same beliefs?
I think there's been some change. I think folks, are realizing that this is real. That folks are wrestling with this, and usually there's somebody that knows somebody. I'll say myself. My son is currently struggling. He's tested positive in Tampa, Florida.
Wow. Sorry to hear that.
This is, I had a first cousin that passed away a week ago in New Jersey. This is personal,
Wow.
And I think people realize this is maybe presidents should all call and check in with Boris Johnson over in England. And what's the thing really feel like? What do you think? Right. People are starting to understand that this is real, yet there's still a lot of economic underlyings here in this part of the country. This is oil country out here in West Texas, and oil has kind of gone underneath the floor. So you've got economic ideologies and concerns that are sort of driving that, coupled with their cousin politics. Mm-hmm. So people, although they realize this is real, there's still a contingent of folks that I don't think are really taking this as seriously as we should. Getting back to business at this point in time, when the numbers are still going up. I mean, if we had a 2-week decline as the administration puts out there, if there was a consistent 2-week decline, I might be able to kind of sort of understand where you're coming from, but the numbers are skyrocketing. They're still going up. Sure. And we haven't even peaked yet.
Exactly.
And you're talking about opening up the movie theater, So just to summarize, your question is excellent. I don't think people really completely get it. There are a fraction of folks that understand how serious this is, but I think there's a large element of the society that's just kind of all over the place with this, and they're not quite I still people walking up on me. A young guy walked up on me today. I went to the store, to rush. He walked up on me. I mean, he was all up on me. Young guy, I had to look around and see if anybody knew who I was.
All up in your civil rights.
That's okay. Yeah, all right, Holy Spirit. All right. Excuse me back a little bit. If I was in Baltimore, I might have
different reaction. That's right.
You step back a little bit. But folks aren't taking it serious. No, we're not wearing a mask. All up on you.
Wow. Well, you mentioned a couple of things, Dr. Hankins, and you were talking about the concerns of the mothers not the mothers. I'm getting ethnic on you, but you're concerned about the elderly matriarchs of the church and so forth. And I guess this question is more down Dr. Albright's lane. They talked about how this thing is spreading and you have to maintain your social distance and so forth. So as we're talking about opening things back up, can you kind of share with us, as we move into the fall months, as they're predicting, Dr. Fauci said that we're talking about now we may have a combination of the flu and this coronavirus thing. What are your recommendations at that point? Should people take the flu shot? Should they not be around people? Should they drink more lemonade? What should we look at? Because if this thing is as nasty as it is now, I can only imagine what it's going to be like when you combine it with the flu.
Yeah, well, the concerns are that obviously that's going to complicate the whole situation more, because you're going to have more sick people who have flu-like symptoms, like coronavirus has flu-like symptoms. And so without, again, the testing comes into view, because you be able to determine if this is influenza or this is coronavirus. Influenza usually doesn't kill us unless you're really compromised already. This coronavirus is killing us when we are pretty much okay, except, you may have something underlying, and everybody who's 60 or above generally has something underlying. You don't usually get through this whole program with nothing going wrong.
Sure.
So that it's gonna complicate the issue. However, if it depending on how complicated it is by what our actions are in the next couple months, because if we put everybody out there again, it's not going to matter either way, because we may be looking at the worst thing that's ever happened on earth. And that's what I think sometimes that people may have a trouble getting a grasp on, like, there hasn't been anything like this in 100 years. Well, very few of us have been around for 100 years, so you've never seen anything like this. But I think the other part of this is that the change is going to come after this. And we have to be in a position so that if another way, and that's what I just am so sad that some of the commentators, they're busy beating the hell out of 45, but we aren't getting to the places we need to. Like, we aren't really testing. I'm sure they're working as hard as they can on a vaccine. I know that. But the treatment and the testing, because for me, the only thing that's going to make me feel more comfortable if I'm in a building and I know everybody in there has tested negative. When you know that you can't tell if a person is contagious or not, then are we going to wear masks the rest of our lives? Or, it just presents so many different issues on so many different levels. Is my doctor safe? Is he infected? You just don't know without testing who's who. And so I wish that they would kind of get off bashing him and hopefully help him or be more encouraging that he get that testing, because he has the power to get industry, take over companies and have them get out enough testing, but he doesn't think it's important. And that's why he doesn't do it. That's why we haven't made the progress since they decided not to follow the scientists on this one. Then you need to have somebody in place who understands, and he doesn't. So that, we could be looking at, maybe the next president before we get in place what we need in order to protect ourselves, because this virus is not going away. And what happens next year? We're going to go through this again next year. So, without putting things in place to protect us, the vaccine will protect us. This medicine, if it works like they hope it will protect us. But, we got a long time to go. Like the doctors tried to tell him in the beginning, 45, it takes 18 months to 2 years to take a vaccine from zero to where we can give it to people. Because we can't just like he should have learned from the malaria medicine that he tried to give people, hydroxychloroquine. But what good could it do? What harm could it do? Well, you see now, it killed people. So, it's a very scientific process to invent a vaccine, produce it, test it, and then, produce it in massive amounts to inoculate a whole country or the world. So it's certainly not as simple as he thinks, and that's why he fired the guy who was the head vaccine man, because the guy was telling him, look, I can't just come up with something and start giving it to people. It may kill people. So he said, 45 said, get out the way. Let me put somebody in there who's going to listen to what I'm saying. So he's just putting everybody at so much risk, bless his heart. And so I don't know. It's a harrowing situation that we're in, and anybody even thought about the liability when you go in a place and you're well, or you think you're well, and you get infected, and your mother or sister or wife or somebody, kids are laying there sick, and they're sick because this place wasn't safe, and they opened up so you could go in there, so you assume that it's safe. However, you should have better sense. But what about the liability of that? Nobody even thinks about that. And what about how are people going to start